Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Vale Glamorgan Council Cabinet meeting of the 7th of September 2023. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and Chair of the meeting as the leader of the Vale Glamorgan Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. If I could just remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. All participants should mute themselves when not in speaking order, when not speaking, in order to avoid any background noise or feedback. And if any participant wishes to speak, they should raise their hand either on screen or using the digital function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues and or to attract the attention of the chair or democratic services officer. Today we've got a really packed agenda in which we're going to discuss a whole range of items, including finance, our performance over the past year, our continuing schools building programme, and the arrangements for the 20 mile an hour speed limit in the Vale Glamorgan. So without further ado, we'll move on to the agenda. I just need to say that normally only the Cabinet remain on screen on this occasion. So that's brilliant. So moving on, it's all right, I do everything online on screen today, so it could be difficult. First things first, if we can have any apologies for absence. I can see most are here, but I think we need to mention that Mark is currently will be en route back from St Bride's, where he's been talking all things 20 mile an hour at what has been a very successful 20 mile an hour pilot. So hopefully he shall arrive on screen before long at all. So that's great. If we can then go on to agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July 2023. And if I can take those as a true record, happy to move.
And I'll second that, leader, as well.
Super. Have we got any declarations of interest, and if so, the nature of those interests?
No declarations were formally received, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Super. And then going on to, we've got a number of references from a whole range of different committees. Agenda item 4 is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q4 performance. Make sure I've got the right. That's great, I've got that on screen. And that's from the Learning Culture Scrutiny Committee on the 13th of July 2023. As we have an agenda item at number 12, which actually includes mention of the recommendations from this committee, I would move that we note this reference and discuss it under that.
And I'll second that.
Super. And then going on to agenda item 5, that's the Corporate Risk Register Q4 update, and that's from the Governance and Audit Committee. Always a really complex discussion in this committee, because we have such a diverse range of members on that committee, and all can bring that to it. In effect, what they recommended was that we considered their comments when we look at the corporate risk register, and they said that consideration should be given to the removal of Brexit from the risk register, given that most impacts are incorporated under other themes. Well, that was actually discussed in the committee itself, and the response that was given to that is that we're probably not quite there yet. Is that Brexit is still an issue and still has an impact in other areas. They're not sort of standalone issues, and some of the things to do with inflation, supplies, and all the rest of it. So while we'll note and be mindful, we won't remove it at this stage. For Cabinet and the Project Zero board to give regard as to whether Project Zero should be attributed a risk impact status of catastrophic. And I think we would all agree that the challenges facing us in terms of Project Zero are huge. Whether or not we are at catastrophic status as yet, I remain to be convinced, and so I would suggest on that, recommend on that Project Zero can also consider it, but I think that we note that and are mindful of it for the future. And then the third third area that they brought up is that further consideration to be given to the impact on the capacity of looked after children, residential care placements and new legislation from Welsh Government, particularly in relation to private sector providers and market fragility. That is I'm sure Eddie would agree that is an area that is actually right at the top of our agenda in terms of ongoing consideration, and it's something that's actually discussed regularly with other councils as well, because we share both our concerns and good practice right across Wales and certainly across the region. So I think that we note the points that they raise at the moment, and that the status in terms of Project Zero should remain as is, but we will consider further in the Project Zero project board. So I would therefore move.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Back to the start of this one. So agenda item 6 is the revised, just looking at the wrong page on it. Right, this is a reference from Democratic Services Committee on the 17th of July, and they were discussing the revised multi-location meetings policy. And the policy had actually suggested that the following council meetings be conducted and broadcast on a hybrid basis once we move to fully hybrid, and except obviously for part 2, in terms of full council, cabinet, planning, governance and audit committee. And then there was a tweak in terms of scrutiny committee meetings that were where they were considered to have a matter of significant county-wide interest, where there would be a large number of people that wanted to view. And I think part of the thinking behind that is obviously we've had meetings live streamed for quite a while now, but I think that as we move forward, the complexity of live streaming a hybrid meeting, so that you've got people that are remote as well as people in the council offices, then we add on the additional side of the potential simultaneous translation of contributions to that meeting, and the level of complexity becomes quite major. On top of that, I think, as was mentioned during the meeting, there are resource implications in this. Is that in terms of managing a meeting, you have democratic services officers that support the meeting. You also have potentially IT officers. There have been glitches in meetings being live broadcast, and research on recent occasions would demonstrate that they are down to user error. And we know that more training is needed for elected members, and that will be going forward over the next few months. But we need also to have extra staff on hand, and to actually live stream adds that extra level of complexity. But I listened carefully to the discussion at the committee, and Cabinet have discussed it at length. And so I think what we are suggesting is that the policy is adopted, but actually for a 6-month period, we try the preferred option in terms of live broadcast hybrid meetings to see how, with extra training, whether or not we can iron out some of the glitches of use for members, and whether or not we can get resources down to a reasonable level, because obviously it's got budget implications. I think in the interim, what we'll just have to do is some of the things that we would have liked to have done as additional task and finish groups on specific subjects, on officers being available to support research for members, etc. We're probably going to have to step back a bit from that, because if this is members' priority, then I think we'll do it for 6 months. We can see how it goes. We can see how viewing figures go, and then we can actually, if needs be, there would have to be a line in the budget for it for next year to match the resources, and then there could be another discussion on whether or not that was what members across the council felt was a priority spend area. So apologies, it is a very complex area, but in essence, I think today what we can do is, if we say that Cabinet note that the council's current multi-location meetings policy, which was at paragraph 417.3 within the council's constitution, has been reviewed in light of the provisions of sections 46 and 47 of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 21 and local governments, Welsh Government statutory and non-statutory guidance for principal councils in Wales on multi-location meetings. That's chapter 15, published in June 2023. And Cabinet considers and approves the report and the revised multi-location meetings policy attached to Appendix A to this report, and that the revised multi-location meetings policy be then forwarded to council for inclusion in the council's constitution. But I think that is but it should be noted, the amendments we've made in terms of the hybrid and live broadcast of meetings for a 6-month period while we review how that goes. 3, that the revised multi-location meetings policy be reviewed periodically by a Democratic Services Committee following any further guidance, changes in legislation or consequential changes agreed by Cabinet, and referred to council for inclusion in the council's constitution. And finally, which is just an add-on to this, is that following approval, the council's public speaking guides be amended in line with the policy. So I think what we're doing is we're saying, well, the policy in principle will go forward, but we will try out those amendments to it, and during that time we can look at the resource implications and actually have a further conversation. So on that I would move.
And I'll second those.
Super. Are we all in agreement? Yeah. Going back to the next one, and then agenda item 7. This in essence is another reference from Democratic Services Committee from Charter to Self-Assessment, the evolution of the Wales Charter for Member Support and Development. And this is about how members are supported to develop in their roles. And it was suggested that there's a framework to do with the aims of framework, principles of development, scope for framework, and the context for it. And the majority of members felt that the framework should be endorsed, although 2 members, Councillors Carroll and Johnson, said they wished only to note the proposals. So the committee resolved that the WLJ proposal to replace the existing Welsh Charter for member support and development with a councillor support self-assessment framework and associated draft principles as set out in Appendix 1 to the report be recommended to Cabinet for endorsement. And I see no reason why we wouldn't endorse the self-assessment process as lined out. So I'm happy to move that.
And I'll second that recommendation.
So agenda item 8. This is another one that we actually are going to be discussing alongside agenda item 23. So I think we note the contents and we'll discuss it alongside the later item.
I'll second that, just for the record. Yeah.
Then we move on to agenda item 9, and this is actually a reference from the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee, strengthening communities, the role of the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee. And Rhiannon, as I think you attended that meeting, you're going to take this.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, I'm actually chair of the committee. So this report sets out a number of issues of relevance to the committee to assess, to assist in developing its future work programme and encouraging more representatives from the voluntary sector to join the committee. It highlights a number of Audit Wales reports which have relevance to the committee and the approach being taken to progress an integrated response to the reports, including better engagement with stakeholders. It also highlights the need to review the voluntary sector compact between the council and Glamorgan Voluntary Services, and this work's already underway. The report highlights the potential for the work of the committee to be aligned more closely to the council's annual delivery plan 23 to 24 and the critical challenges of Project Zero, the cost of living crisis and organisational resilience. The council has strong relationships with the range of third sector and community organisations, and this has strengthened in recent years, not least because of COVID. Work is underway to reflect on the learning from the pandemic and cost of living crisis and to articulate a vision for how the council can work to support communities in partnership with other organisations, including the third sector and town and community councils in new ways. This is described in the report. This work will complement the work underway to reimagine how services can be provided and communities strengthened. For example, the Public Services Board work on tackling deprivation and the Llantwit Major Food Project, among others. Placemaking will also be a key part of this work, and it's important that this committee has an opportunity to be part of this. And there's a number of proposals which are contained within the report if people want to read it. So the recommendations are that the committee Cabinet notes the work being undertaken to review the voluntary sector compact and the potential to shape the committee's future work programme and encourage more voluntary sector representations on the committee. The committee endorses the approach outlined in the report for engaging with a range of stakeholders to determine how the council can work better with the third sector and social enterprises and increase community resilience and develop an integrated response to the 4 Audit Wales reports detailed in the report. The committee supports the approach outlined to align the work of the committee more closely with the critical challenges in the council's annual delivery plan, the work of the Public Service Sector Board and the council's transformation programme. That this report and the comments of the committee be transferred to committee for their consideration. The report is circulated then to all members for information. If people are happy with those recommendations.
Yeah, happy to second. Oh, Eddie wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Rhiannon. I just, yes, I'm happy with the recommendations. I just wanted to highlight also that as chair of the Regional Partnership Board, this is one of the key agenda items to utilise the third sector and voluntary sector. And it's been recognised that they've got such a big part to play that we as an authority in partnership with both with Cardiff and the third sector need to sort out some of the high priorities we've got with health and social care as we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I know it's not mentioned in here, but it's under the PSP as well. Just compare with what the recommendations are put forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we'd all agree that there are lots of organisations out there doing really good work, and some of them, they come time to time to the committee and report on what they're doing. But I think that what we're trying to do is focus them onto these reports about, you know, alleviating poverty, so forth, bringing communities together so that their work has a point and a direction and that everyone is pulling together, rather than it being a lot of disparate groups which are not focused as keenly as we would like to see them. Okay, so if the people are happy with the recommendations.
Yep.
Thank you.
Super, thank you. So we move on now to reports of meetings. And the first one, agenda item 10, is Cardiff Capital Region Regional Cabinet of the 5th of June 2023. Now, sometimes meetings are long, sometimes they're short. So I think this is succinct in the extreme. But actually, if you go onto the Cardiff Capital Region website, you'll be able to actually read the reports that were agreed in relation to these minutes. So I think it's just left to us to note.
And I'll second those, Leader.
Thank you. And everyone's in favour. That's super. She'll then go on to the minutes of the annual meeting of the Shared Regulatory Services Joint Committee. And I think, Ruba, you were there, so if I leave that to you.
First mistake, put the mic on, sorry. So yes, this was the AGM. So I have been the chair of this committee for the last year. And as many of you will know, we share the chair. So the chair goes around to the three authorities that are involved. And so now the chair has moved to Bridgend. So this was the AGM, and we noted our audit, our financial report, and looking forward, we discussed the business plan for 2023-24. And of course, as ever, we looked back and looked at the annual delivery plan. So it was a sort of housekeeping meeting, which the minutes actually describe very well. So they're just for noting. So that's it, Leader.
Thank you, and I'm happy to second. And everyone's happy. That's super. So moving on to the reports, standard reports, get those organised. The first one is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, and as I mentioned earlier, that was mentioned as one of the references, and it's to present the Q4 performance reports for the period 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2023, and it's looking at how we've done in terms of delivery of our commitments as aligned to our corporate plan well-being objectives. And I think it's really good to say that all 4 corporate plan well-being objectives were attributed a green performance status at Q4. 90%, so it's 343 out of 380 planned activities have been attributed a green performance, with only 10% of planned activities were categorised as red. In terms of performance measures, it's a similar picture. 70% of measures were green, and 23% red in this. So the report is before us to consider the performance reports and the proposed remedial actions to address areas of identified underperformance. I think we need to say that all 5 scrutiny committees have reviewed this report on the 11th and 19th of July, and on consideration have noted the performance and also the progress to date in relation to the annual delivery plan. So if I can just scroll through this, because there was a bit of a comment. Most scrutiny committees purely noted the report. There was some discussion about school attendance figures and looking at further detail regarding the reasons why poor performance has been documented, and that they're talking about that it should be considered ahead of a report on school attendance being presented to committee in September, October. Well, actually, a lot of work's been going on in relation to attendance, and if I'm not mistaken, the recent data that I've seen actually shows that we are doing quite well in a Welsh capacity, and there's also a very effective campaign where you might see banners outside schools, you might see adverts in bus stops. You know, when you're looking to see what time your bus is going to arrive, you might see an advert there flash up about is it I can't remember what wording is. It something miss out anyway. Miss school, miss out. I can remember that. So that is already ongoing. There was also a query about the service plan action in relation to Barry Library, in asking whether or not the completion referred to the planning or implementation of the makerspace. Absolutely delighted to say that the makerspace is up and operational. It's currently taking specific bookings, but in the not too distant future, I'm sure that they'll be running courses as they do in the Penarth makerspace. So those were the two that were raised in those. So the recommendations before us today are that Cabinet considers Q4 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 2022-23 commitments as aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives, and secondly that Cabinet consider the views and recommendations of the scrutiny committees in relation to Q4 performance and approve identified remedial actions as the basis to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified. And so I think that we note the views and recommendations of scrutiny committees and the recommendations as outlined there. So I'm happy to move those.
And I'll second those for the record, Leader.
Thank you. And no dissent, so we're all there on that. So
Leader.
moving.
Sorry, Leader, Councillor John.
Leader, I just wanted to mention something on this
Oh,
report.
right, yes.
It's absolutely a tremendous report. The amount of detail in there is huge, and it's very positive how well we're doing. But I just wanted to mention achieved in our homes and safer communities section. 100% of domestic abuse victims reported feeling safer as a result of security improvements to victims' homes delivered by Safer Vale Partnership. Just goes to show how well our Safer Vale Partnership is doing. And I'm looking to pay them a visit on Monday, actually, but I just wanted to mention that because I don't think we realise the amount of work that is being done, and it tells us clearly how residents are a lot happier with the work that's being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyn. And I think yes, it's very relevant, because if you are in that sort of situation, the last thing you want to do is have to leave your home. So the work that our teams do in actually making home safe for people is really valued. Thank you for reminding me on that. You did mention it earlier, didn't you? So that's super. So we're all happy to agree that. Moving on to agenda item 13 then is the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment for 2022-23. And this is where we take a look at it at the start of the process. And this will then go round all scrutiny committees before coming back to us. So, I mean, as well as it being a requirement for Welsh local authorities under the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021 to undertake a self-assessment, it's actually a good thing to do, isn't it? It's a good thing to reflect, to look back, to pull together all the data, and to see are we actually achieving what we set out to. And the report, which is Appendix A, is actually quite comprehensive on that. We've evaluated a wide range of performance, engagement, and other data insights from our annual planning and performance framework. And that includes the annual directorate self-assessment and peer challenge process. So that's actually been ongoing over the summer, where whether it be scrutiny chairs and directors and officers, cabinet members, etc., have all been together and looking at all the data and poring over that. So we actually feel that our performance on this has been good, which is actually very good in relation to some of the challenges that we faced in the past year. There's a programme of engagement activities scheduled for September 2023, which will target local people, businesses, council staff, other key stakeholders, to actually see if what we feel has happened is what people actually feel is their experience. It will also go to all our scrutiny committees, as usual, and it will go. Really sorry that I've got a train going past outside, if that's making a noise for you. And it will also go to the Governance and Audit Committee as well. The self-assessment findings were informed by data, performance, engagement insights over the period of April 2022 to August 2023. And that does allow us to reflect on that. So we've been asked to review and endorse the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment report. Hang on. I'm just reading this, there's a typo there, which says 2021 to 2022. It's 2022 to 2023, so we'll need to amend that. Appendix A for the basis of consultation. That will then, when all that's happened, it's gone to scrutiny committees, governance and audit, it will come back to cabinet, and eventually it will go to full council for approval. So the recommendations that we have is that cabinet review and endorse the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment report 2022-23 as the basis for consultation as described in this report, and recommendation 2 is that cabinet refers the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment report 2022-23 to the Governance and Audit Committee and all scrutiny committees for their consideration as part of a programme of consultation, with any views and recommendations for changes to the judgments or proposed actions, that's in effect the areas for future focus, being referred back to cabinet for their consideration prior to the final Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment report being considered by Governance and Audit Committee, Cabinet, and thereafter presented for endorsement by a full council. So with the amendment of the slight typo, and I also need to mention that there is a slight typo on the date of the meeting today, which says that we're in Wednesday, 7th September 2022. We need that to be 2023 as well. So on the basis of those couple of little typos, I would move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Leader, I would just like to speak on this item.
Yeah.
I think it's a tremendous report. Once again, we don't appreciate, I think, sometimes the amount of work that goes into these reports, but this is an excellent report, and particularly in my portfolio area, the Golden Pass expansion of the Golden Pass has been expanded to older people, and this has meant that the well-being side of things have really developed with walking football, netball, walking basketball, which have developed over this last period. In addition to that, of course, we've got the Nats skateboard park, which is opening the end of this month. That'll be another milestone met, a new skateboard park, which is absolutely tremendous. And then, of course, whilst we didn't have funding for the Summer of Fun from the Welsh Government this year, we did put together a huge amount of activities for young people. And I must say, Karen, Joe and the team have done a tremendous job in looking after all these children throughout the summer period. And of course, this carries on throughout the year with the Winter of Wellbeing programme. And quite honestly, there's a lot of good work going on out there in looking after young people and also the older age groups in their well-being. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Leader.
Super. Thanks very much. And actually, I'd probably add in a mention for Karen's team that that they supported the recent opening day at the Bellevue Pavilion, and it was hugely successful. Lots and lots of very happy children on that day. And but I want one of the balloon swords that I saw being created at the event. So are we all happy with those recommendations? Super, thank you, and welcome, Mark, back from St Bride's in time for your report. So that's good news. So the next report is agenda item 14, and that is the capital monitoring report for the period 1st of April to 30th of June 2022, and in effect the first quarter of this year. And so it's the programme. Capital programme actually totals 125.8 million, just slightly over. That includes some items that slipped from 2022-23 into this year, and that was about 8.7 million, and also things that have been added in to the capital programme of just over 13 million. The forecast outturn in the programme is projected to be 126 million, and spend to the end of June is just over 9 million. I mean, I have to say every time, don't I, that many areas are continuing to experience an increase in costs associated with the tenders that are being received, and many of them over the current allocated budgets, and that means that officers are having to renegotiate the works, and this is happening on an increasing level. Schemes are being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends and slippages, and slippage is anticipated later in the year, so we'll be asking service areas to provide information for the Q2 monitoring report, which will come to Cabinet in October. Appendix 1 details financial progress on the capital programme as of the 30th of June by scheme. And if you look at Appendix 2, it sets out by directorate the changes from the approved budget that we agreed in Council in March. So that's details the sort of movements in year, including slippage and additions. And that was actually having that analysis available last year was actually contributed to the way that we were able to deliver 98% of our capital programme. The report details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of emergency powers, which are detailed in Appendix 1 to the report. Further paragraphs have been included which highlight 2 schemes which are being delivered in this year's capital programme. That's the active travel schemes funded by Welsh Government, and also the Barry Wayfinding project, which is proving very popular. The report requests to make amendments to the current capital programme. Some of the requests include things like an allotment grant for to increase the availability of good quality allotment plots, and make potentially accessibility and biodiversity, and also a stronger community grant fund where a number of grants have been allocated under the fund to the sum of 136,000. So a table is included in the report which provides further detail. So quite a comprehensive report. Thank you to our finance team for pulling that together. We've got four, if you look at page 2, we've got 4 recommendations before us, which are quite involved. But just to go through, the first recommendation for us today is that Cabinet is recommended to note the progress made on delivering the 2023-24 capital programme. That Cabinet's recommended to note the use of delegated authority as set out in the report. 3, that Cabinet is recommended to note the use of emergency powers as detailed in Appendix 1. And 4, Cabinet is recommended to approve the following changes to the 2023-24 capital programme, and those are listed out on that page. So to do with St Athan, additional learning needs grant, Victorian Schools, High Street Primary, early years childcare, Cattraeth Kerry, asset renewal for highway surfacing, the allotment grant, target hardening grant, which Gwyn's just mentioned about the use of that, and the stronger community grant fund. So with those details before, those recommendations before us, I'm happy to move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
And everyone's happy on those. And then getting the next one. So we're now on to the agenda item 15, Q1 revenue monitoring, and that for this year 2023-24. And this is the first revenue monitoring report that we have available. Just get back to the top of it for myself. It sets out a balanced position overall for the council, but it also highlights the financial challenges that we're facing. The most significant pressures are within social care, and that's both adults and children. And as was just mentioned earlier, in terms of being mindful of the cost pressures on children's services. With a growth in the number of packages and increase in cost too, there's a forecast £1 million adverse variance after unplanned use of reserves of 3.2 million. It is a major challenge, but it's part of our commitment to support our most vulnerable. In environment and housing, there's the same level of adverse variance driven by a range of things, such as transport costs, repairs to highways, and market forces payments to HGV drivers, where we need to recruit staff. These variances are currently being offset by a £2 million positive variance in policy, so we'll be able to move money out from policy. Investment income is up due to the greater than anticipated increase in interest rates and the council's ability to internally borrow for its capital programme, so we can move our own money around rather than having to pay interest costs elsewhere. The council has a significant savings programme in place for this year, and that's actually somewhat greater than has been required in recent years. Very good progress is being made in its delivery, and we're currently 85% on target to be delivered, and mitigations have already been identified for this 7% of savings where delivery is behind plan. The council's reserves are set to reduce to 54 million from 110 million at the start of year. So, you know, that is planned use. This is broadly to plan, with 35 million supporting new capital expenditure. But I think we have to say that of concern is the significant rundown of school balances, and then added to that the unplanned use of the social services reserve. So it's the stuff that's coming out of the woodwork, and we have to meet those costs. But I have to say that officers are closely monitoring spend and exploring opportunities to mitigate the pressures the council is facing, and these reports will be taken to scrutiny committees, and as usual, I have no doubt that our officers will be able to answer any questions that queries that are posed to them. So just a few recommendations in relation to this report today. That's one, that the position with regard to the authority's 2023-24 revenue budget be noted and the report be referred to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for review. And two, that members approve the environments requested as part of this report as set out in table 1. So I'm happy to move.
And I'll second those.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone's happy on that. Pull up the next report. So this is another first quarter report, and this time it's a Treasury Management Monitoring 2023-24. And as Cabinet would be aware, the revised CIPFA Codes of Practice published on the 20th of December 2021 now require the Council to report to Cabinet quarterly in respect of its prudential and Treasury indicators. So in terms of the prudential and Treasury indicators, the report details the minor changes in the capital programme since last reported to Cabinet and updates the prudential indicators to reflect these changes. I think it's fair to say all changes are marginal and fall well within the limits as set in the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy. In relation to borrowing, to that, due to current high borrowing costs, the Council is actually self-financing new capital expenditure and maturing debt, which has led to a reduction in the amount of external borrowing. So the amount that we've had to borrow from 148.482 million as of 31st of March 2023 to 145.657 million as of the 30th of June 2023. So in just a few months, it's gone down just under 3 million. This amount falls well within authorised limit and operational boundary indicators set for the year. And borrowing costs in the first quarter this year fell marginally to 4.81% from 4.91% in the last quarter of 2022-23. So in relation to investments in the first quarter of this year, the Council's investment portfolio fell from 93.920 million to 83.320 million as of 30th of June 2023, as capital expenditure was financed from reserves. So we were using the money in reserves that we might have invested to actually build things and deliver capital projects. Maturing Public Works Loans Board debt of 2.734 million was repaid and wasn't refinanced. We didn't take that back out. The average rate of return for all investments increased to 3.99% over quarter 1 this year from 3.40% for the last quarter of last year. So a fairly straightforward first quarter report, and the recommendations for us today is that Cabinet note the quarter 1 monitoring report for Treasury Management 2023-24, and that the quarter 1 monitoring report for Treasury Management 2023-24 be referred to Governance and Audit Committee. I'd move.
And I'll second that recommendation.
Thank you. Everybody's happy on that. Just getting to the next page. Much easier when you've got paper, isn't it? Thought I'd got it all organised, but it's the tabs are going out of alignment. So right, we're up to agenda item 17, and this is the non-treasury investment strategy. this came to us, and I think that when we first talked about it, we were talking about a growth and investment fund. So if people are thinking, well, where's this come from? It's that. I mean, we agreed a high level strategy in 2022 to support innovative business support and economic regeneration with a focus on green jobs and infrastructure. So alongside the strategy, a growth fund of 2.2 million was established, but there was also a 10 million provision for borrowing, if needed, included in the council's capital programme. So this report builds on that initial work. We, in the initial work, we decided what we wanted to do. We wanted to have finance available to support some of the plans that we wanted for our towns. So we wanted a comprehensive investment plan, and that's what's now been developed to take the initial high level strategy forward. So there are three key components to the plan. There's a strategic framework, and this sets out how, sort of the how and what the key issues to tackle are, and it's, those we've reaffirmed from the original report is things like persistent inequalities in our communities, higher than average levels of carbon dioxide, the ageing population, and poor levels of productivity and prosperity. And they're things that stand out. And if you actually read the report, it's quite detailed in terms of the evidence. The management plan sets out our 4-stage approach from pipeline to delivery and the governance arrangements for the investment. So how we will manage that to make sure that actually delivers what we want it to do. And the initial actions. So in terms of that, work's already underway to establish the initial pipeline. And given the resource, the level of resource, initial investment will be targeted at the key settlements, with Barry will be at the forefront because of the more recent placemaking work. So that's in a position to move forward more quickly. And that will be followed by the other key settlements and rural communities over the longer term. The investment plan, you'll find at Appendix 1. So anything that is put forward for investment will come back to us, rather than, it won't just be signed off. So the recommendations for this report that sort of takes us on to our next stage on this is that Cabinet notes the contents of this report and approve the non-treasury investment plan as set out in this report and appendices, including that the prioritisation framework and investment principles and values be noted. 2, that the prioritised schemes supported by the non-treasury investment board will be brought back to Cabinet for approval in due course. And 3, that a progress report be submitted to Cabinet in 12 months' time, and for progress to be monitored by Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. And finally, that the initial focus is set out in the investment plan will be on the key settlements of Barry, Cowbridge, Llantwit Major and Penarth in the short to medium term, and will be approved, and with rural communities and strategic employment sites such as the enterprise zone being considered as and when opportunities arise. So yes, well worth a read, quite a thick document, but in terms of what we're trying to do to go alongside other regeneration activities, I think quite an exciting opportunity. And obviously it'd be Bronwyn's team that will be developing the plans that will come forward. I'm just doing this bit because it's finance and that comes under me. So I look forward to getting those forward. So I'm happy to move.
And I'm more than happy to second the recommendations here, and as I look forward to seeing the development of this. So thank you, Leader.
Super. So right, I'm just losing all my paper. So moving on therefore to agenda item 19, which is report of the Deputy Leader. And oh no, it's not. I've got one more. I thought I'd finished. So yes, agenda item 18. This is actually the strategic collaborative working initiatives update, and we do this normally every 6 months. And this outlines the well, it gives a compendium of the various strategic working initiatives that we're involved in, and that's provided at Appendix A. It provides an oversight to the sort of strategic level collaboration. I think it's fair to say that there's an awful lot more hands-on and sort of locally based sort of shared working initiatives, but these are at the higher level. I think it still takes about 13 pages, so makes interesting reading with all the various partnerships and arrangements that we have. And the recommendation for this is that Cabinet endorses the strategic collaborative working initiatives that are in place to support the delivery and development of council services and the council's wellbeing outcomes and objectives. So I'm happy to move.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Now we are moving over to agenda item 19, which is of the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places, and that's the BSC2 Building Works contract. Over to you, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much. So with this report, we're looking to seek authority to carry out a procurement exercise, and that's the aim of that is to undertake to tender a works contract for the remodeling of the entrance, reconfiguration and alterations of the existing car park, along with internal works to the BSC2 building, which is at the Innovation Quarter. And the aim of this is to much improve access and the facilities at that site. So just as a quick bit of background, many of us will probably remember this as it was an IT skills centre. It was opened in 2004, and at that time it was operated by Cardiff and Dale College. So in 2015, when they vacated the property, we've been operating it as a business centre. Which is the intention is with these refurbishments works to carry on, that it will continue in that capacity, and the whole aim of this is to actually achieve much better facilities. I mean, at the moment we've only got tenants on the ground floor, and the top floor is unoccupied, and then there is a former train repair shed which is attached to the building, and then the former adjoined shed building has actually been let via tender for gym use. So following discussions with previous and current tenants of the building and our own research, it's highlighted issues that are limiting the letting of the building and the long-term retention of tenants. And because of this, then the rents have historically been below market rates, and then the first floor units, as I've already mentioned, have been vacant now for over 7 years, quite a substantial time. Now, in order to bring the property up to the current standard, we have recently installed a new heating system, and then previously design consultants were commissioned to look at the highlighted areas and those points that were raised about it internally and externally. Oh, excuse me. So feasibility work has already taken place, and that was previously tendered out to architects, and then the design consultants then were appointed in 21, and they've actually completed those feasibility works. Which has then led to this planning application submission and SUD's approval body application for the necessary works. So the tender, so the whole aim of this is actually the regeneration procurement team will advertise a works package, and it'll be via Sell to Wales. And it's to secure a contractor to carry out the phase 1 of the project. And the phase 2, which is actually the extension of the car park, will be subject to a separate report and approval for Cabinet in the future. So this is solely aiming with this phase 1, which is obviously the bigger part for now. So I've actually got 3 recommendations for us today. So the first one is that Cabinet notes the procurement process for this scheme, and that's actually laid out then in the report. 2, that Cabinet gives delegated authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Head of Finance and also myself as the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places to accept the preferred tender and approve the letting of the works contracts associated with the project following the completion of the tender process. And the third recommendation is that Cabinet authorises delegated authority to be granted to the Monitoring Officer, stroke Head of Legal and Democratic Services, and Operational Manager Legal Services to draft and execute the contracts for the award of a contract with the successful bidder. And I move those 3 recommendations today. Thank you.
Super, thanks, Bronwyn. It will actually be really super to see that building completely occupied, because there's undoubted demand. The first BSc is always rammed. So yes, no doubt in seconding that, and I don't see any dissent. So that's agreed. Super. So moving on, therefore, for some good news reports, I think, to the reports of Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language. And the first one is a proposal to increase capacity for Welsh medium education by expanding Ysgolion Morgannwg. That's over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you. So as Liz has said, this is about Iolo Morgannwg. In May, Cabinet considered feedback submitted during the consultation period on the proposal to make a regulated alteration to Ysgolion Morgannwg by increasing the school's capacity for schools of statutory age, school age from 210 to 420 places from September 2025. We further determined to progress the proposal through the publication of a statutory notice published in June this year. In accordance with school standards and organisation, any person can object to the proposal within 28 days from the publication of the statutory notice. A number of engagement sessions were arranged as part of this consultation process, including meetings with governors, meetings with staff, a pupil engagement session, and drop-in sessions for parents, guardians, and members of the community. The proposal to enlarge the school was designed to address a number of challenges, including supporting the objectives of the Vale of Glamorgan's Welsh in Education Strategic Plan 22-20 to 32, contributing effectively to the Welsh Government's target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, addressing issues with the existing Ysgolion Morgannwg site, which does not comply with Building Bulletin 99, Building Framework for Primary School Projects, and ensuring the school is able to meet the latest demand for Welsh medium primary education. No statutory objections were received during the objection period, and a decision is now required on whether to implement the proposal to increase the capacity of the school. So the recommendations are that Cabinet considers the report, this consultation document, consultation report and statutory notice, that Cabinet approves implementation of the proposal to make a regulated alteration under section 2.3 of the School Organisation Code 2018 to increase Welsh medium primary provision in Cowbridge to meet future demand by increasing the capacity of Ysgolion Morgannwg from 210 places to 420 places from September 25. The Cabinet notes that the transfer of Ysgolion Morgannwg to the new school building, whilst consulted on, is not a regulated alteration under the Act and is therefore not subject to statutory process. People happy with those recommendations?
Happy to second, and I think the people of the Cowbridge area whose children will be going to that school will be absolutely delighted. I know I've had lots of messages from them. So yeah, that's really good news. So therefore, moving on to the next agenda item, that's also education. This is an update on the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme and proposed revision to the Strong Communities for Learning Band B Strategic Outline programme.
Right, thank you. Part 1 of the report is to provide Cabinet with a progress update on Sustainable Communities for Learning programme Band B programme. The Band B programme has made considerable progress, with 6 school projects and a Welsh medium childcare provision are now being operational. Cowbridge Primary and Derry Newydd have recently been completed and will be now operational from September 23. St Nicholas will also be completed by October 23. Oscar St Barrack Phase 2 works are underway and planned for completion in the autumn term. Proposals for St Richard Gwyn Catholic High were presented in July of this year, and approval was given to proceed with the consultation this month. The Directorate of Learning in Schools are developing options for the rolling programme, the third wave of investment for the next phase of projects, and a Cabinet report will be submitted for consideration during this autumn term. Part 2 of the report highlights the proposed changes to the Strategic Outline Programme, and these are outlined below. The current total funding envelope is about £211 million, 155 million funded by Welsh Government and 56 million funded by the Vale of Glamorgan Council. This report requests approval to increase the Band B programme envelope by £15,847,114 to allow for the inclusion of Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg, 14,523,000, increased costs for Ysgol Derry, 984,000, and an increase in contract value for the consortium contribution Ysgol St Barrack, 339,000, and together this will increase the total envelope to £227,218,411. Cabinet approval of this request would allow Sustainable Communities for Learning officers to submit a revised SOP to secure an approval in principle from Welsh Government for the updated project costs and submission of the business case. The report is long. If people want to go through it in detail, I'm happy to do so afterwards. But the recommendations are: the Cabinet notes the update on the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. The Cabinet approved changes to the Strategic Outline Programme and expansion of the Band B programme envelope to include the Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg scheme and increased costs for Ysgol Derry and Ysgol St Barrack. And that Cabinet approved the proposed amendment to the capital programme and profiles for the Band B Cowbridge Primary Phase 2 Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg scheme as set out in the table in paragraph 5.9. People happy to accept those recommendations?
Very happy to second, and see all the nodding heads. I have to read the details more thoroughly, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, so far there's been about 240 million spent in the last 10 years.
Yes, that's my understanding. Yeah,
on new schools and on maintenance.
Yes.
And then if you add this on to that total, it is an absolutely superb performance by our Strong Communities for Learning team to deliver these. I was due to go and pop into the schools last week and I had to cancel, but I hope to go and visit the new schools very soon. It's been brilliant to have 3 schools within about 6 months again. So,
yes.
Absolutely delighted. Thank you for bringing this report, Rhiannon.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to being able to show these off to the Welsh Assembly Government next week, who are coming to have a look at these projects. Don't want to have my photograph taken. I just want to be able to have the photographs taken of the sites so that people can see the fantastic work that's being done. And I don't know if others of you have seen some of these sites, but they are amazing. Really, really gratifying to see.
They are, and then be off in your wellies cutting the turf in Ysgol Derry too as well soon. So that's absolutely brilliant. But that's agreed. Moving on then to the final education report, and that is agenda item 22, disposal of surplus land at St Cyrus Comprehensive School, Penarth.
Thank you. The land at St Cyrus Comprehensive School is unused, but until recently has been temporarily used for storage in connection with the development of new builds on the council's adjacent land to the rear of houses in St Cyrus Road. The project is completed this summer. The owners of 3 and 4 Quad St Cyrus Penarth have approached the council requesting to purchase the land adjoining the rear of their properties with a view to extending their gardens. And if you look at the plan, it's outlined in red. In accordance with the Council's land disposal protocol, the Strategic Insight Board has been consulted on the proposal and no alternative council uses have been identified. The capital received from the disposal of this land would contribute to the delivery of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. And this is not, this is something that's happened before. I know that houses in St Sire's Close have purchased small plots of land which were deemed extraneous to our use in the past. So the recommendations are that Cabinet declares the parcel of land at St Sire's Comprehensive School on the map surplus to the Council's requirements. Authority is given to the Director of Learning and Skills to dispose of the land shown on the plan at Appendix A under Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972, subject to compliance with the relevant legislative provisions. That delegated authority is granted to the Director of Learning and Skills in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language and the Head of Finance Section 151 officer to appoint an external valuer to provide a market valuation report for the land and agree appropriate terms and conditions for the disposal of the land. And that Cabinet authorises the Monitoring Officer and Head of Legal and Democratic Services to prepare, complete and execute the appropriate legal documentation required to dispose of the land. Are we happy with those recommendations?
Yep, happy to second.
Excellent, thank you very much.
So moving over now, we have our Cabinet Member back and up and raring to go, having explained or looked at the benefits of 20-mile-an-hour zones in St Bride's. We can talk about the rest. So agenda item 23, which is a report for the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services, the objection report, proposed traffic regulation orders for exceptions to Wales 20-mile-an-hour default speed limit and implementation of auxiliary speed limits. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader, for that introduction. I just will go through some sort of background to this report. That Cabinet will be aware that the default speed limit of 20 miles per hour on restricted roads is due to come in force later this month on the 17th of September. As you will recall, certain roads can be identified as what we call as exceptions, in accordance with Welsh Government guidance, which was published in October 2022. Setting exceptions involve keeping the speed limit generally on A and B class restricted roads at 30 miles per hour, while defaulting to 20 miles per hour. Other roads, of course, outside of this are what we call out of scope. Public notice for proposed exception orders was given on Thursday, the 22nd of June 2023, inviting objections in writing by midnight on Wednesday, the 19th July of 2023. And this is where the objections are coming to this report from those two dates. An identity report on the proposed traffic regulation order for exceptions to Wales 20 miles per hour default speed limit and implementation of auxiliary speed limits was then presented to Cabinet on the 6th July 2023. The Cabinet report was then scrutinised by the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee on the 18th July 2023, with comments raised by the committee detailed within this report and referred to this Cabinet for consideration. During the traffic regulation order public consultation period, we have 153 contributors and 193 responses or concerns were received, many of which led to an alleged inconsistent application of Welsh Government's exception guidance. And can I also thank those people who have contributed to this report, because that has really informed us in terms of our decision making. There will always be differences of opinion as regards to interpretation of what we call guidance. And though I am of the firm belief that the process for considering proposed exceptions to the 20 miles per hour default speed limit throughout the Royal Vale Glamorgan was carried out in pursuant to the guidance provided by Welsh Government setting exceptions to 20 miles per hour default speed limit for restricted roads. Our technical officers have considered and interpreted the guidance provided by Welsh Government and assessed evidence from multiple sources, including analysis of the latest collision data records and composition of traffic where available. In addition, they have used their professional engineering judgment combined with local knowledge of the highway network in a reasonable, reasoned, and proportionate methodology to substantiate the basis for making an exception from the default 20 miles per hour speed limit on A and B class roads. In all cases, our officers have considered the principal question of whether there's a significant number of or potential numbers of speeds for lower or pedestrians and cyclists travelling along or across the road, and the extent that they need to mix with motor traffic for proposed exception sites. We have used place criteria as a primary guide when assessing all A and B class roads, about with mitigations based on a variety of local factors to aid decision making associated with place criteria, such as protected facilities meeting relevant criteria within the Active Traffic Act guidance, which is known as ATAG, and safety of vulnerable road users being considered when determining what roads to retain at 30 miles per hour. The presence of local shopping, stroke business, stroke tourism, and visitor areas as an additional attractor is included with local facts to substantiate evidence of significant pedestrians and cyclist use along the road. One of the points I will make is that it's impossible to hypothesize the potential number of cyclists or pedestrians that will use the route based on perceived road safety. Perception differs from person to person, and unfortunately, the Welsh Government guidance did not provide any forecasting model or formula to determine future usage. If strategic A and B routes were reduced to 20 miles per hour, the composition and volumes of motorcycle would potentially deter inexperienced or leisure cyclists from using these routes. However, it's acknowledged that more seasoned and experienced cyclists will use these routes irrespective of the type and stroke volume of traffic. The objections and other comments are summarised in the report before you, with detailed officers' response to the points raised. As a result of the objections made to proposed exceptions, proposed to make 5 changes from it. Number 1 is West Farm Road on part in Ogmore by Sea, removal of 20 as private road, which is Appendix C referred. Cardiff Road, Dinas Powys, extension of default to 20 miles per hour, and the Appendix D referred. St Nicholas Road and Park Avenue, Barry, default to 20 miles per hour, and the Appendix D is referred. Ueni Cross Corntown and Ueni, default to 20, and the Appendix D referred. And finally, Windsor Road, number 5, Windsor Road between Plaster Street and Marconi Avenue, default to 20, and the Appendix D referred. Cabinet approval is required to overrule the other objections made and accept the amendments to proposed traffic regulation order to ensure the 30 miles per hour exception sites and auxiliary fees are implemented as proposed. Before I move to the report recommendations, I would advise that Cabinet is very much our intention to keep all proposed changes under review. The safety of our highway users are our utmost importance, and the full consequences of major such changes to speeds of highway will only be known when they have been operational for some time. Should further changes to the exception list or any of our speed limits be required in the future, some matters will be dealt with via the Director of Environment and Housing Delegation to publicly advertise and introduce traffic regulations laws in consultation with myself or via Cabinet should the objectives to such changes be received. The recommendations for the report as follows. I'm going to move those recommendations. First one, number 1, that Cabinet notes the recommendations made by the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny on the 18th July and the officers' response to both these recommendations and objections received as part of the public consultation. Number 2, that Cabinet approves the amendments to post-traffic regulation orders as identified in the schedule provided at Appendix C and D, and the objectors are notified of this decision. Number 3, and number 4, that Cabinet agree the use of Article 15.14, that's the urgency procedure, in respect to the above recommendations. Before I finally move this report, can I also thank the officers who have spent hours, and I mean hours and days, on collecting all this data, researching it, answering people's queries. They have done a fantastic job, and especially the operational manager for highways. And I like to personally thank them, and I'm sure the Western Cabinet would like to thank them. There's sheer amounts of efforts here. So I moved the above recommendations 1 to 4.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to second that. And if you'd like to, we could actually add those thanks as that they are recorded.
Thank you very much. If that's a 5th recommendation, I'm more than happy to do that, to amend that.
So you're going to move that, and I'll second that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think they've done some superb work on this, and actually been superb in terms of the grillings that they have faced from Cabinet as well, in terms of justifications required for certain decisions, etc. I think, as you said, I mean, there are an awful lot of areas that are in the balance, aren't there?
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
think we're only going to find that out over time. And I think that there are some that might not work, but there are other areas that actually we might want to move to 20 mile an hour following a review. But no, super report, and really looking forward to it. So I'm never going to get to my ambition of getting to 20 mile an hour on my bike then. So so yeah, I'm happy with that. Everybody else happy with that? Super. And we'll take that forward. And then we're on to our last item for today, and that is agenda item 24. That's report of the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health, and that's the annual corporate safeguarding report for 2022-23. Over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Leader. I think the only missing bit from the introduction is you've left the best to last, but I'll continue with this anyway. As you can see from the executive summary, this is a corporate. There is a corporate responsibility to ensure that there are effective arrangements in place to safeguard children and adults who require specific council services. This annual report 2022-23 provides an overview of the corporate safeguarding activities taking place across the authority. You can see, looking at the background, attached to Appendix 1, it gives you the annual report. For me, it's a very good overview. It shows that it's across the directorates, social services, learning skills, corporate resources, and environment and houses. And as such, it's a holistic overview of representation of what safeguarding activities across the council. And I'm really pleased to see that actually working. Often people present themselves for one area and then you realise that they've got other things, other needs and supports required. And for me, this report indicates and shows that it's working really well. So I'm hoping that when it goes to scrutiny committees, that they'll look at this with regard to their particular areas and provide the scrutiny that it requires. You'll see that from the background also that Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act 2014 was implemented in April 2016, and this provided a duty to report, which has meant a revision of the corporate safeguarding policy to bring staff's attention to this duty. And then from that, further on, there was working together to safeguard people guidance. And this is again to protect children and adults at risk. This was launched in 2017. And this is more specific, and it provides advice on what should happen if an individual has concerns about the well-being or welfare of a child or an adult. The reason I want to highlight that is because we all have a responsibility. And often it's, when people talk about an incident, or that's social services or somebody else's responsibility, there's a change of view now that it's, if we see something, then, often we want to know what to do. And that guidance provides that. And it's important that we recognise that. And I would challenge all members and staff that what would they do if they saw an incident? Do they know the duty safeguarding number, etc.? Who are the designated safeguarding leads? Thankfully, this is across all the organisation. So, particularly in schools, obviously that's established. So I'll just bring that more to the attention of members. There's a set of new safeguarding procedures. Wales safeguarding procedures were launched in 2019, and they detail the essential roles and responsibilities for practitioners, and they, ensure that they safeguard children and adults who are at risk of abuse. And those procedures are designed to standardise, not just within the Vale of Glamorgan, but across Wales, and also between the partner agencies, police, youth offender service, all those other agencies that we deal with, the health boards, etc. So that there's a set procedure rather than, as often sometimes is the case, people don't really know what to do and don't quite act in the way that they should do. But in having this sort of safeguarding procedures, is that it will help us fulfil our statutory roles in relation to the adults and children in risk. I'd also like to point out that the Vale of Glamorgan Council adopted the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Regional Strategy on the 30th July 2018. Now that's some time ago, yet we've seen, thankfully, we've seen an improvement in services and support provided. We've a long way to go, not just us, but I think society as a whole, recognising the supporters' needs. And I think there's a change coming about where somebody presents, then we're providing the support. And in fact, earlier we talked about one of the reports about how we're supporting people, you know, those that come to be abused or in domestic violence situation, that they can stay in their own homes, and we're providing support for those, so they may be made safer. So I'm pleased to see that that's actually happening. Some of the key issues that we've been able to that are covered in the report is that we now introduced an online DBS checks, and that includes members. Like it's something I'm you know, pleased that that's happened, and I'm pleased to say that there was an audit carried out, and recently all members have been satisfactorily checked. So I'm pleased to say that they're complete. Just as we would expect all our staff in those roles, specific roles, and have a responsibility, they would be checked, and that's been well established for some time. Let's see, across the, so in the report you'll see the Social Services Directorate has an ongoing and increased allegations against practitioners. This is child protection reports and registrations. They've slightly increased, but the Social Services Directorate are dealing with those. It's just that important that they recognise that that's in the reports and that people should be aware of it. And also, as part of the report, it gives information about the Social Services Corporate Safeguarding Board that we have, that we're in partnership with Cardiff, and we contribute to that financially in the region of £32,000, and so that covers off in the report. So I've tried to be as long as Mark in his presentation of the report, but I don't think I've managed to do that. So I'll go to the recommendations now. And the Cabinet notes that the work that has been undertaken to improve corporate arrangements, safeguarding and protecting children and adults. And 2, the Cabinet continues to receive 6-monthly reports on work carried out to improve corporate safeguarding arrangements and the effectiveness of relevant policies. And the report is referred to corporate performance and resources, environment and regeneration, healthy living and social care, home and safe communities, and learning and culture scrutiny committees, as well as governance and audit committee for consideration. So I'm quite pleased that, although I haven't gone through in detail on the report, that many people will be able to see it and scrutinise it. I so move.
Super, thanks, Eddie. I can see that Rhiannon wants to come in here first.
Yes, thank you. I know I'm very pleased about this report because, you know, it denotes how seriously the council takes all of its responsibilities in this regard. You know, I mean, particularly, you know, coming from my point of view of education, of safeguarding children, vulnerable young people and adults. That's very gratifying. And in another part of my life, I deal with domestic violence and the outcomes of it. And, you know, it was really pleasing to hear both from you and from Gwyn earlier about the work that we're doing in order to ensure that people who are the subject of domestic violence are able to stay in their own homes, but they are able to, you know, have security precautions put in place in order to protect them, because obviously one of the difficulties of domestic violence is people having to leave their homes in the middle of the night with a carrier bag, and goodness knows where they're going to end up or where their children are going to end up and how disruptive it is for their entire lives. So, you know, I'm very pleased, you know, anything that we can do to, you know, mitigate the problems that people have in this regard is to be applauded, and I'm very happy to do that.
So, Rhiannon, were you seconding the report?
I'm happy to second.
Super, excellent. And the rest of us are all in support, so that's really good. So I don't have any other items. I don't have any part 2 items and I don't have any urgent items. So I think if we can ask officers to stop the recording and check that the live stream's finished, then I can draw the meeting to a close, and thank you all for your